So, hi everyone. Welcome to the episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, film critic and journalist Carolyn. Hi. So, this is the podcast slash YouTube channel where I talk to film creators from around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And so, this is one of my interviews for the 2023 New York Asian Film Festival. And I'm joined by director Boi Kwong and actor Jason Ho to talk about their film Geylang, which is I thought it's a wild ride. This film is no one is a hero. And like no one is everyone is a hero, everyone is a victim, everyone is exploited, and everyone is an exploiter. So I kind of like how the film kind of touches on how like none of these characters are really like black and white, you know. Like I love that they exist within the grays, and it centers around this he's a pimp first of all, and his name is Fatty, and he's played by Mark Lee, and he just has the worst night possible. He has the absolute worst night possible where everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. And we're going to discuss this film because I always say I love films that I can't ever predict what's going to happen. And I had no clue which direction this film was going to go. And I was just like, what is happening? What on earth? What's happening? So much is happening. And that's actually pretty good because that's the kind, especially for action films. I love action films like this. And it's not like super stylized. I like that you didn't make it like very hyper stylized. It's very gritty. It's very realistic. Like the fighting is very pick up whatever your hands touches and throw. So, which is actually my personal fight style. So we'll begin first talking about that, Boy. I want to talk first about making this film as gritty as it is, because I think for all of the characters, they encompass that whole visual look of the film. Gritty and very realistic. And there's nothing polished about any of them. So talk about the aspect of the film first and why you chose that particular style of filming.
Okay. I'm a big fan of director like Johnny To, and he does a lot of film that is neo noir kind of style. So I'm adopting this visual for this film. Reason being, I like the grittiness of the high key visuals, and I purposely make the entire floor wet, whereby there's a reflection that is done. It actually gives a very it gives a look of how Geylang is at night as well, and actually suits the look of the film and the style basically, and the genre of the film. So that's the reason why I adopted this look. And actually, because of budget constraint, we shot in a very small camera using the Sony A7S. So we actually make use of the quality of the camera and the grain of the camera to create this look lah. So this is one of the reasons. Is a conscious effort that from the beginning, when we are doing the storyboarding and the treatment, we had a discussion, and this is the direction that we are going with. Yep.
And so yeah, I'm actually really glad that Jason is here, because though your character would be considered a minor character, I think your character is the most surprising because of what happens at the end. I'm just like like the one that you never pay attention to is the one that you should always watch out for. Is something I always say: the quietest people are usually the most dangerous. And your character to me is just like, I wouldn't even call him a snake. I call him a mouse, where like mice are very smart and they know how to find their ways out of situations. And one of the things about this film is it like, because I've never been to Singapore, so I've never been to Geylang, but it kind of gave me the sense of a maze, you know, and like all of these characters are like mice running through this maze, like running in circles and trying to get away from whatever it is that's chasing them or whoever it is that's chasing them. And your character, your character Red, like he's very unassuming. But the thing about this film is, as I said at the beginning, you can't trust anyone in this film. And like the way that Boy films it is like, when you think you know someone, where you think you figured out the angle and you figured out who these characters are, it like he throws in a twist. And a lot of that has to do with the fight, the filming style. So I wanted you to ask you about, as a performer, like being in the space that he provides as a director and being in these scenes and like what we get to see of Red, but then also like being able to stand back and watch how he films. What are your impressions about the film from the perspective of an actor, and then also as an observer, like watching his filming?
As an actor, I had fun. I had the freedom. You know, he gave me the freedom to to do what I feel was right
The
for
design,
it, the design, and he doesn't restrict me. He goes with the flow, and he say, "Don't just deliver the message that you're supposed to deliver in this scene, and just do it. Just be natural." That helps, for a performer to be able to deliver his lines and be convincing. From an observer, I must say this is really a very different film in Singapore that I've never seen before. From the way it's shot, the way we speak. Everyone in the film, the way we speak is very real, and it's really how some Singaporeans speak. It's really raw, it's rough, and we just go and we mix up our languages as well. So in that sense, from an observer point of view, I feel that it's a very genuine Singaporean style of life, the way we speak. At least for the language it is.
Yeah, because in Singapore we have a few main races, and every one of us speak like 3-4 languages, and this is exactly how it is in like Singapore on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
So I attempt to make it as genuine as possible, because a lot of time when we make film in Singapore, a lot of times either we make an English film or we make a Mandarin film, but a lot of time we forgot that, hey, this is a Singaporean film, so it should be how it is from Singapore. So it's a conscious effort. Yeah.
Right. And that ties into like what you said about the filming style being like natural and just like going with the flow. And as you said, Jason, like he allowed you kind of like to, as an actor, to like go with the flow and like be comfortable in this in the scene. And that ties into the language, because the thing that I'm always interested with, especially like Southeast Asian languages and films, is that because of the political history of these countries and like colonialism and imperialism, like there's all of these like countries like Singapore and like Malaysia and Thailand are like melting pots of what we would call melting pots of cultures. And that's very similar to the Caribbean where I'm from. I'm from Barbados, and our first and only like main language is English. But we have what we call standard English, which is like what I'm speaking, but then also like our dialect. Like if it was to speak in our dialect, it would be a completely different discussion happening here, because like the language and the flow is different. And I appreciated that you made sure to include that into this film, because this isn't a film about people in like the upper echelons of society. Like they're not bankers, they're not CEOs, they're not executives. They don't have to like try to impress anyone, like they're just being who they are, and they're existing in this space. This is their space. And the language and the filming style ties into that, because like there's a scene where Fatty tells Sheila, he's like, what are you speaking to me English? Like, and because he's like, I'm not gonna respond to you in English. And it's not he doesn't speak English, but he knows English. But he's like, if you're gonna have this truly honest conversation, and if you're gonna threaten me in our tongue, like speak to me on my level. And I love that scene because it's a very small thing, but I think also speaks a lot to the politics and the culture of Singapore. As you're saying, like people are multilingual, like many people are polyglots, but even when you speak, like if you speak Singaporean Mandarin or whatever, there's still like dialects, so like even when he's talking to her, he's speaking in a completely, she's speaking from, because I know a little bit of Mandarin, but she's speaking in standard Mandarin, and he's still responding in kind of like a dialect of Mandarin, right? So like you still get that perspective of his of who he is as a character, but also who she is, because she wants to be a politician, she's trying to keep it this veneer, and that's coming through in all of these in these interactions. So talk now about building the characters, because as I said, none of these characters are heroes, but they're also not explicitly victims, and they are victims. But when you realize, you're like, when you think, oh my gosh, this person is like completely in the clear, then you're like, no, I can't trust none of you, right? So talk about building the characters and what you made them into. Like they're all basically, not all, I would say about half of them are anti-heroes, basically, yeah. Because I would say Sheila in a sense is a victim, but she's also a villain. The character of Shangri-La, she's a victim, but she's also a villain in some sense. She's doing what she can to me. But we'll discuss the two of them in particular. I'm really fascinated by Sheila and Shangri-La. But talk about the dichotomy and the complexities of these characters existing in the gray.
Yep. So the film is called Geylang. Is about a place in a red light district in Singapore. And actually, when in the journey of making the film, I actually went to interview the actual pimp, and actually interviewed the actual prostitute as well. And in fact, even the doctor's character, there's this hospital clinic that actually provide assistance and medical assistance to street walkers and illegal immigrants or illegal worker for them. So, and even Celine's character, there's actually a real organization that basically help sex worker. It's called Project X. So all these are actually drawn from real inspiration. And also at the same time, when I was talking to all these even pimps, I realized that they all are like anyone else. It's not a one-dimensional thing. Every one of them have, even myself or you or whoever, there's always a gray area. It's never about yes, right or wrong. When things happen at that night, you are pushed to the edge, you were flipped. So this is something that I want to express as well. No, in this world, there's no true 100% good person or there's no 100% villain. It's just that you are put in a situation and this is how you react to it. Yeah, so this is something that a conscious effort that I wanted to put in right from the beginning of the scripting process. Yeah.
And for the character, Red, now talk about the reason why I want to talk about his character is not just because Jason is here, but as I mentioned, he's like they said, I kind of likened him to like a mouse, and he's like the observer of the entire situation. So talk now about, so we have like, no one is ever exactly a hero or villain, but talk about have a character who works as an observer, because he's watching all of these characters basically implode, their lives implode, and he's standing back. And it's always fascinating to me in films where you have a character who is basically like an insert of the audience. They're seeing everything unfold the way we do. So talk about adding a character, because there are people who say, oh, but this character isn't necessary to the plot because he doesn't really do anything. But at the end, you realize he kind of does tie everything in a complete circle. He adds the moment you realize, wait, so this is all truly interconnected, and he's like the character that ties the bow at the end. I realized, you know what, he's probably the slickest out of the bunch. He's the one that's going to survive to see another day. So talk about having a character like that. You will live to see another day. I always say the cowards live to see another day.
I was the winner, right? I was like, yeah,
exactly. You made it out unscathed.
Yeah. So why? And I would explain why.
Oh, okay. So for Jason's character, actually he's a film. He's an actor that I always use. Even in my earlier film, he's also exactly the same name, called Red. Yeah, and then why he has this character inside? I want to make use of him to show the audiences that even a very, very small character or a small action could actually turn the whole story around. Just like what the whole story want to do. Everybody, there is no black and there's no pure whiteness. Yeah, and actually he acts as an eye for the politician, which is actually Celine's husband. So it actually also implied that in Singapore, although we are a very clean and a very legal society, but actually there's this underbelly world that you are actually fully controlled by the politicians. So it's like Edwin, which is Celine's husband, actually is like a civilian camera who understand and know what is happening the entire night, and he's actually like a spy to him. Yeah. So it's like I'm trying to intertwine different character with each individual, and in this one whole night, what can go wrong will go wrong. Yeah, and he actually summarized the entire film. Yeah. Right,
and like we're like talking about what can go wrong will go wrong. Everything starts out with Fatty, and when at the beginning, I remember I was thinking, okay, the synopsis said it has to do with this girl going missing, and he has to find this girl, and then I was like, where's this gonna happen? Because it starts out with this situation with like a loan shark. And it just escalates from there. And then again, this is one. I think this script is actually very complex, because there's scripts like this where every single action leads to another reaction. Like everything is a domino effect. Like every single thing, every single decision that each of these characters make ends up being interconnected to another decision that another character makes. Like there's nothing that they do that's not completely related to someone else. And in talking about everything that can go wrong, will go wrong. Like Fatty, like I said, he's a pimp, and like usually he's the kind of character who'd be like, I'm not supposed to feel any kind of sympathy for someone like that, because he exploits women, like he's using these women's desperation to make money for himself. And he himself but then you see that he takes care of his father who has dementia. So like that's adding an element of humanity to him, and you realize, okay, so maybe he's exploiting these girls because he has to look after his father. And it's not that it's an excuse, but you're seeing like the reasoning for why he does the things that he does, And then there is the character of Shangri-La. She's a victim. She's being exploited by Fatty and by the men who come to her. And then there's this doctor who just like is completely insane. I'm like, sir, like, what are you doing? And like when he entered the scene, it kind of made me think of how there are these, mostly, and they're usually men, like they will target sex workers. They'll target female sex workers, and they'll take out whatever issues they have on society on these sex workers. But I'd be like, you bypass the men to get to the women, like, and I'm just like, this is another example of that. It's like, if you have a problem with sex working, why you don't attack the men who exploit these women? Why you don't attack the pimps? Why are you attacking the women? So talk about that aspect of adding the beginning the story, discussing about the pimp as well as the prostitute, and how why those two, and why these particular characters in particular.
Okay. For the character Fatty, actually is loosely based on my own experience. My dad has Alzheimer's disease, so I actually built that into his character. And at the same time, as I mentioned, we were doing a lot of research, speaking to a lot of pimps. Actually, the pimps in Singapore do take good care of their girls, actually. In fact, like every month they will buy them dinner, or when there's like Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year, they will have a gathering. So it's actually like still a very humane relationship between the pimp and Shangri-La. So I think I'm also trying to express an authenticness as well to the audiences. Not that, if you are pimp means you are ruthless and you are fully exploiting. Some pimps also have their principles. Yeah. And also like Shangri-La, why she come here to become a sex worker? It's not because she wants to or she choose to, but circumstances cause her to have to be a sex worker because the father is sick. And this is also based on research, and it's actually quite common. And most of the prostitute in Singapore comes from around the region. And after speaking to them, that's the most of the case that they face. And also like Dr. Sun. Dr. Sun in the story was actually trying to save his daughter. So how his connection with Shangri-La is because the blood and matches. So it's all intertwined and all interrelated within that night. And then, as you know, you have seen the film, Shangri-La has made use of Jie, which is the illegal seller, and then the whole thing get revealed. So it's like a film that has many layers, and you got to watch until probably close to the end to realize that, hey, this is what is happening.
Exactly. Nothing is as it seems. So now you just ended off talking about Shangri-La. So the thing is, I really want to talk about Shangri-La and Celine, because these are two women where they have so much in common, but their end goals are completely different. So like both of these women have very traumatic experiences. They've both been exploited physically and sexually by the men in their lives. And when you think like, okay, they're about to get away, they can't. But then you realize that even Celine has her own ulterior motives. Because she has, like you mentioned, the project, which is the Project X in Singapore. Like her project is called the Angel Project, and she's like looking after like sex workers, and you're thinking, oh, she has this connection with Shangri-La because of this, like she wants to protect her. Then you realize, wait, no, not exactly, So like again, nothing is as it seems. But then Shangri-La, also being a victim, she also has power. So I like that both of these women have power. It may not necessarily be power that people would applaud, but it's still a form of power, and it's still a form of them to be able to I guess have one over on the men in their life. So talk about building these two particular female characters and making them this complex, because I love that I wasn't able to predict where their characters were going to go and their motivations, and I love that they're not completely to use the term from the film, the angels. They're not like complete angels. So like talk about building these two female characters in particular.
Okay, I start with Shangri-La first. You may not understand, but Shangri-La is actually in the Oriental culture. It actually represents paradise. It's actually a very nice place in China. So when we started the film, we wanted to make like every character actually have their own paradise. For example, Dr. Sun, the paradise actually the love for the family, for his loved one, and then Celine is the paradise is power, and then also Ajie is money, and then kinship is Shangri-La, and same thing for Fatty as well, is to the care for the father. So everybody have their own reason and their own paradise. So these two female characters actually plays a very important role in the film, because they actually depict the weakest and the strongest spectrum of this world in Geylang especially. By the end of the day, actually, when you look at the film, the character actually flipped, and the one that's the weaker actually was the one who plot the entire thing, and the one that was the strongest is being taken as a victim. So it's a deliberate effort to try to switch the role in the film. Yeah.
Yeah, but in talking about power, the thing is, people like using Celine as an example. A lot of people think that in power comes freedom, but to me, power is a way that you can confine yourself, because there's like the old raps on more money, more power, and like if you don't have the connections to handle the power can consume you. And I see Celine as an example of that. She thinks that she's gaining so much power in betraying character, in betraying people like Shangri-La and like any other person that she would have betrayed. But she's kind of locked herself in a cage. She's like in order to maintain this power, she's putting herself in a situation where she knows that she has no power. So it's just a facade. And that's the thing about this world where we aspire so much for power. Like power is a facade. Like true power doesn't really come in oppressing other people. Like if you have to oppress people to feel tall, you don't have real power.
There's no meaning in it.
And so for you, John, I want to talk now from your perspective as a performer of power, because as an actor, you have to be able to control the character that you're playing. You can't let the character control you. You can't let the character consume you. So like not just for this film, but just as an actor in general, talk about your perspective on power in society, but as well as a performer, because you have to command, as an actor, you have to make sure you command the space that you're in and that you command the character that you're playing.
Well, I'm not a super experienced actor. This is only my third film.
It's okay.
Yeah, so it's the third one, and a couple of other small projects. I think it is more of like how you are able to control yourself and also to feel the character, right? I mean, there are days where I get certain projects that I don't feel like I feel it, and then if that happens, then it's hard for me to convey. So as long as you are able to feel it, then I think I can control it. And it's also about balancing how much a director wants and how much I can give, and how much I feel this is what is right for that character. It's a lot of thinking process, and it also comes from a lot of experience. I like looking at people wherever I go, and I observe people and observe small little body language, a little actions that they do, the way they speak, the way they stand. And these are things over the years I've experienced, I've seen, that I use and apply in my approach to my acting. I don't have a one way of doing it or a professional way of doing it, but it's just based, most of them are based on what I've experienced, what I've seen, and then I try to mix and match on my own with my own approach.
Mm.
So my style is more like a conversational, and we actually discuss the character. If you're talking about whether he has to manage my power and I have to tell him, no, you got to do this. I'm not the current director. I like to convince the actor, and I like to listen to what the actor like or what the actor feel, and then in the end we find a center point. Only that way I feel that you can give the most genuine performance. So like how I work with the rest of actor is all the same. I do like a one-to-one workshop. We discuss about the character, and even have a writer on during the production to say, hey, we might do some tweaks here and there because there's some style that the actors want to put in. So basically this is how I work with different actors. Only when the actors believe in the character, the actor can perform in that way. There's no power play about this.
I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to take it. Okay, so we talked about power, and I talked a bit about these characters like not knowing the true consequences of power. Now, on the opposite side of power is limitations. And I want to ask you in particular, Boi, about this film. This film is extremely violent, but what I didn't notice is that it's not gratuitous. Whereas, like, for instance, when someone is being harmed or being killed or whatever, the camera doesn't linger on those kind of sequences. Like, it's not about showing the violence itself. Like, the violence is implied. Like, we don't need to see someone's head literally get visually smashed in to get the idea that is happening. And like, I am a huge fan of like action films, especially like Hong Kong action, like Taiwanese action and Chinese action. Like, they can get very graphic, and like this film is, I would say, is graphic, but it's not gratuitous. So like, gratuitous to me is where like it just goes over the line. And I'm just like, you're just like being, this is just ridiculous now, and it stops being enjoyable for me. But your film wasn't like that. So so the reason I mentioned it is because I want to ask you now, as a director, when you're directing a film like this that has so much action and so much violence, how do you know when it's time to pull back, and like the limits of the action that you want to show, the limits of the violence, and you say, you know what, this is as far as I'm willing to take it?
Okay. So for me, how I process when I edit a film, I will edit everything as per script. And then after that, we will organize a lot of focus group for the 5th or the 6th edit. And I always believe that as a director, or the creator or the editor, a lot of time we are so indulged in the story that we kept very blind. And I make a very conscious effort that, hey, this film, when I make the film, I am making a film for an audience. So the audience got to also understand that, hey, it is okay or enough or not too much. At the same time, I also doesn't want the violence at the back to be overwhelming, that actually make the film lose its original essence at the beginning. So it's actually a lot of exploration, modification, understanding, focus group to find a balance. In the earlier cuts, when I was doing it, my stunt director was definitely saying, not enough, I got to have it more violent and everything. I did have an earlier more violent cut, but as I evaluate the project as a whole, I realized that, hey, maybe this violence take away the essence of the film. So through that, we have to moderate it.
It's very violent, but I think like the violence, it kind of like plays a part in the story itself, because like this is a very gritty setting. This is a very gritty part of the city, and like these people are living lives on the edges of the margins of society. They're outcasts, so what you would consider social outcasts. So like they're not gonna sit to debate. Like, it's action first and possibly maybe ask questions later.
Okay.
So I appreciate that we got to like all the characters coming like that.
Thank you for your time. I think we got to go already.
I think you're right to the edge. Thank you so much for talking with me today. Enjoy speaking to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Same to you. Bye-bye.